How do you do? I want to talk today about this idea, which of course is in the title of the video, called the woke to personality disorder pipeline. Whatever do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to explain in much more detail. But I do want to say that I know that the title sounds very derisive, and perhaps in a sense it is, but I make this video in the spirit of really trying to understand the other side, as it were. People who genuinely believe this stuff to whatever extent, and who are acting on that belief. Um, I really do believe that there are things encoded in these philosophies that basically, they slowly erode a portion of a person's, I hate to say it, but humanity. And I feel like getting to the bottom of that as much as possible, analyzing that, and trying to come to something of an objective, uh, sense of what that really looks like, is key to actually, trying to have compassion for them. And so obviously this is to some extent motivated reasoning. I'm decidedly against the woke stuff, so you can't count on me to be fully objective. I wish I could be, but I probably can't. But this is meant in the spirit of objective, serious study, genuine curiosity. But so as to what this whole thing means, this woke to personality disorder pipeline, what I have in mind when I say personality disorder, I'm really thinking of what the DSM calls the cluster B personality disorders. And those are, they include narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. But what they tend to have in common is this tendency to a certain amount of emotional instability, labile, sort of volatile emotions. There's a tendency to be possessive or manipulative in relationships. Often a need to attach oneself to others in some way, and in one sense or another, for meaning and sense of self. And importantly, one we're really going to look at more closely in the video is splitting. And splitting is where you basically split people into basic, binary categories that tend to be something like good people or bad people, for me or against me, kind of thing. And I want to. There's the thinking is that underlying a lot of these issues is basically the problem of an underdeveloped ego, right? So if you have someone whose ego didn't fully develop, let's say their sense of self isn't fully developed, and it's not stable, right? They don't have a real permanent sense of who they are over time. And what ends up happening is that they sort of they default to sort of very basic contrasts, and the first of these contrasts is basically me versus not me, right? So in other words, if I have this unstable, undeveloped ego, the only sort of sense of self that I can rely on over time is literally the sense that I'm me and not other people, right? And so I'm defining myself in opposition to those who I am not, and that's how that informs how I see human interaction. Right. So I'm primarily defined over time by the fact that I'm me and not you. You're defined by the fact that you're you and not me, or you and not whoever you might happen to be interacting. That's how I see the world of human affairs when I'm in this state. And so this comes to a form, your sense of interactions between people, your sense of the morality that is to be applied to that, if any, and there will tend to be these basic sort of dualities, right? Like be things like who's winning, basically, right? Who's winning, who's losing. Since you define people primarily by basic separation from each other, well, which guy's winning? Or as that develops, it may become something like who's good and deserves to win, versus who's bad and deserves to lose, right? Who am I rooting for? And so that theoretically comes from this sense of an underdeveloped ego. And this underdeveloped ego doesn't, it doesn't really know itself. It doesn't have, by definition, it doesn't have a sense of itself. And it's somewhat of a blind spot unto itself, right? It's kind of this giant blind spot, which then sort of finds its place in the world, right, by finding the blind spot of the world. What I mean by that is, a person like this may settle if they're of a certain, intellectual proclivity or a certain level of intellectuality. Um, they might, they'll settle into some kind of avant-garde field, some kind of field where they're basically looking at analyzing issues that are so big or so obscure and arcane or so cutting edge that basically everyone is on the same level as them in this realm, right? Because things are still a bit confused, things are still a bit volatile, we don't fully understand it yet, the ground is shifting, right? Things haven't settled into like um, clear rules and roles, as it were. Things haven't really crystallized, and so the sort of unstable personality, the unstable ego, often finds its home in some form of the avant-garde. And I use the term loosely, right? Not just like weird art stuff, but uh, so anyway, I you could probably tell where that's going, right? That's so the woke philosophies and various underlying philosophies, right? Um, to an extent, and obviously not every single person who's involved in these things, but to an extent, I believe that's part of their genesis is sort of that they've been imbued with characteristics of an underdeveloped ego, of a sort of personality disorder or similar person. And so I mentioned splitting, right? This is what I'm going to hone in on. This is maybe where it's most clear. It's at least sort of a very a simple example that can really be honed in on here. But the splitting is everywhere in this theory, right? It's all about like, these people have power, these people have no power. These people oppress those people, right? And it's these gigantic cross sections of humanity. Right? It's like, well, men oppress women. White people oppress non-white people. White people have power, non-white people don't have power. Right? And it's a version. It's a version of this sort of like who's winning, or alternately who deserves to win, which is usually the person they say is not winning. Um, but it's a form of splitting, right? And there's other forms throughout the theory, but this is really the one that kind of everyone knows, right? It's kind of staring you in the face, and once you start looking at it, I think it becomes more clear. But anyhow, this so it's sort of encoded with certain this volatile, personality disorder sort of. It's almost like this little package shows up at your door with this undulating plasma inside it. It's like this very volatile product um, that's got like all of this personality disorder stuff in it. And the hook is that it's stuff that's very appealing in a way to people who aren't like that, right? To people who are more integrated, more developed egos, more socially developed, emotionally developed. Oftentimes, someone like that, they have empathy. They care about what's going on in the world and what's happening to other people, right? And they want to know about the world around them. They want to know about the social environment. So when you have this thing that's presented, like, well, here's, this is sort of how power dynamics are going down right now. Here's who's oppressed and here's who's doing it, and here's some stuff we could do about it. This gets some people excited, and to an extent rightfully so, right? This is you could see where that would appeal to a lot of people who are not at all unhealthy people, right? Who are well developed people, even good people. And so what happens is you have you internalize this theory that has this splitting thing going on at this mass level, right? In other words, like we said, the broad cross sections, the really broad cross sections of humanity, the men, woman, the black, white, whatever. So because this splitting is done at this conceptual level that's so much bigger than anything in your life, Or because it's such a broad category, rather, it encompasses everything in your life, right? So every relationship in your life, every interaction in your life kind of falls under this concept, this theory, which ultimately suggests into your mind a form of splitting that applies to every social situation. Um, and so as you go through life and as you have these interactions, as you go about these relationships with these ideas sort of front and center, it gradually sort of iterates, and it really kind of begins to stick in it develops a presence in your sort of neural networks, and it becomes more and more a part of your personality, especially as you're sort of, they have these little tricks where you're looking, oh, if someone acts like this is a sign that, they're uncomfortable about their privilege, or this is, this particular act by a man is a common, patriarchal trope, and he's trying to put you in your place, and this sort of thing. You're constantly sort of connecting this big idea, this big split. You're constantly connecting it into real world relationships, into real world situations, such that in going about them, right, in going about these interactions, you are solidifying this doctrine and this way of viewing the world that in many ways amounts to splitting. You know, and be it as simple as like these people have power and these people don't, and of course everything that entails, right? And so it gradually it gradually trains you to see the world in this way that's more and more sort of the way that a personality disorder person would see it, or a person with a sort of a maladaptive or destabilized ego. And in a way, I feel like it's the reverse of good therapy, right? Therapy is, you speak of like cognitive therapy, right? That's pretty much the main, the dominant mode of therapy right now. What you're basically doing there is, you'll have some kind of emotion or reaction or something that you don't like, and you'll work with a therapist to sort of to isolate these thoughts, these core beliefs that underlie these feelings, that underlie these behaviors. And, the goal is to sort of to identify the beliefs and to sort of adapt them into something that's a little more, realistic or positive or whatever. And in doing so, you gradually get rid of the behavior, get rid of the negative feeling. And so you can see where, in a sense, this is like almost the opposite. You have this maladaptive idea that sort of applies to every situation in the real world, and in living out those social situations, let's say, you're solidifying this bad idea, this maladaptive sort of way of looking at things, over and over again until it just sort of it becomes part of you, and it's in a sense kind of a degeneration of the self, of the ego. And these interactions sort of become almost a furnace where bad ideas are become I would a bad personality almost. But yeah, that's sort of the basic layout that I would give there. In a real introductory way, I mean, there's certain practical things that you could really use to strategize about this. Because I mean, the point in trying to lay this out, right, as with anybody, is like to make a map of it whereby we can sort of identify coherent strategies to actually begin to do something, right? So I'm just sort of hoping in laying out this model, I can help people think a little more clearly about it. It helps me think more clearly about it. So maybe in the future, I'll put out a video or two about possible strategies based on this one. But anyway, that's the video for now. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe, I beg of you. Leave a comment if you like, and do enjoy your day, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you next time.